All right. Well, it looks like we are live. This is our May 2019 Patreon live stream. So, this is exclusive to our Patreon viewers. So, thank you. It looks like there are two of you guys watching right now. So, hopefully, we bring that up and get a few more. But I just want to say welcome. And thank you for being here. I want to apologize in advance. Ran out a little bit of time to get prepped for this. We had a little bit of a plumbing emergency here yesterday, so I wasn't able to get the new camera and new mic set up. So we are still set up with the webcam on the iMac. So probably not the greatest sound, but hopefully you guys can hear me just fine. If you're having any sound problems, please let me know in the comments. So really a couple of things that I wanted to start off with is I wanted to make this live stream a little bit of a preview for something that we are going to cover on Mail Call Mondays. I asked you guys in the Patreon comments a little while back, I think it was a week and a half ago or so now, about 22 rimfire trainers, what you would like to see for a 22 base class rifle, because we shoot the Voodoo V22 in NRL 22 competition. We actually had our local NRL 22 match on Saturday, and myself and my oldest son, my 17-year-old, we went out and we shot that match, and we used the Voodoo V22, which is a great rifle. Thankfully, we had a little bit better turnout at our local match than we have the last couple of matches, but one of the things that concerns me is the rifles that we keep seeing showing up are generally in that base class price range. They may not strictly be base class rifles. They may have some modifications to them that would push them out of base class, or a scope that would push them out of base class previously before the new rules. But the thing I keep seeing is they're not super high dollar rigs. And what concerns me with our local club is myself and one of the other shooters, we both shoot Voodoos, and these are really expensive rigs. And a guy coming in that maybe wants to be really competitive sees those rigs and may be dissuaded to come back. So I'd like to get a little bit more base class action going on. And so that kind of interested me in something that I can spin into this, because there are not a lot of guys out there that are going to go out and just, without ever shooting an NRL 22 match, drop $3,000 to $4,000 on a rig to shoot that competition. Now, there are some guys out there that would do that, but there are a lot that maybe are not really into that. So there were a couple of options out there, because base class requires that the total package, rifle and optic, has a MSRP of less than $1,050. So, theoretically, your rifle could cost $1,000 and your optic could cost $50, or you could buy a $300 rifle and a $750 optic. So you get the choice to push that, which direction you want to push that. My recommendation would be to go with a little bit higher end rifle, and a little bit and use the balance on the optic. There are a lot of good 22 options out there in that $350 to $500 range that are going to be adequate for NRL 22 competition. A few of them that I just thought of off the top of my head, and I asked about them in our Patreon post. We actually had a little bit of a poll, which I will pull up here in just a minute. I asked about the Tikka T1X, the Savage Mark II, specifically the FBSR model, the Ruger Precision Rimfire, the Ruger American Rimfire, the Bergara BXR, and the CZ457 Pro Varmint. And I am looking at the returns right here from that poll, and it seemed like 30% of you wanted to see me do something over the CZ457 Pro Varmint. That was at the top. The unfortunate thing is right now, it's really not available. The CZ457 Pro Varmint is out of stock everywhere I've looked, and nobody really has a solid time frame on when it's coming in. So while that would be a great rifle for me to give a try because of the way the barrel switches out, apparently it uses all the 455 accessories, magazines, etc. So there is an upgrade path for that from base class to open class, but just not being able to get a hold of one right now or know when I could get a hold of one, that kind of knocked it out of the running. The next up in the poll was the Tikka T1X, which looks really interesting for me because the T1X has the same footprint as the T3X, so the larger centerfire rifle. So ideally, if you shot a stock T3X, you could get a T1X as the trainer for it, and they will be very, very similar. If you are using factory accessories, the factory accessories that you put on the T3X should also, most of them, fit the T1X. So the fore ends and the grip and that kind of thing. So that is a very interesting option. Plus, the trigger apparently is fairly decent from the factory, so you're not wanting to switch out the trigger right away. But it does have some drawbacks, like scope bases are not readily available. There are only a few companies out there that have them. Magazines are not super plentiful right now, and they tend to be a little bit on the expensive side for 22s. So, you know, it's a balancing act. The next one that came in was the Ruger Precision Rimfire. Again, that has been blowing up. It has a lot of options for moving from the base class into open class. Leisure makes barrels. I believe Proof even makes barrels for them now. There are quite a few different barrels for that rifle. Green Mountain even makes an upgraded barrel. I checked out one of those at the NRL match on Saturday. Plus, there are hand guards and there are triggers available for them, bolt handles, all kinds of other stuff out there. So, and again, if you shoot a Ruger Precision rifle in centerfire competition, then the Ruger Precision Rimfire is the easy choice for NRL 22. Next down the list was the Bergara BXR. We have talked to Bergara about that rifle. They are not shipping yet. It is a 1022 pattern rifle. It doesn't really utilize any actual Ruger components. They are all aftermarket components put together in the traditional type stocks that you see on the Bergara target rifles or hunting rifles. So it is a very interesting package because you basically get a custom 1022, but it falls in that production class because all those options come from the factory, and they fall in a relatively competitive price point. So that one really interests me because we still see quite a few 1022s at NRL 22 competition. They're a very plentiful rifle. They're fairly accurate right out of the box, and tons of stuff you can do again for that upgrade into open class. So the way I see the Bergara BXR working is really a great option to go from the open class, and then if you want to put a better scope on it later, you can move into open class. I'm sorry, in base class, you can put a better scope on it, move into open class, and then you can do some other stuff to upgrade them. Now, if you guys have any questions over any of these rifles, go ahead and throw them in the comment section, and I will be happy to answer them. And somebody give me a thumbs up if my sound is good. The meters look really, really low on my audio, so I'm not sure exactly how good the sound is that's coming out right now. Can you hear me just fine? So pretty much the last on the list was the Ruger American Rimfire. And the Ruger American Rimfire, there are a few guys out there that had commented that usually the 1022 and the Ruger Precision Rimfire steal all the thunder, but the American Rimfire is a nice price point, but not a super expensive rifle overall. So I just didn't know a whole lot about it. I got to check one out Saturday, which was yesterday. and it really does look like it has some good options. It has some good features. There are heavy barrel targets available with elevated combs on them, and they do accept 10/22 magazines. So 10-round magazines are plentiful for that rifle. So it does have some good options out there. I just I don't know. It doesn't get a lot of love for some reason, and it may be later on we take a look at that rifle and see where we're at overall. So that was kind of the options, and I mulled it over. I really went back and forth. It took me quite a bit longer to choose than I really wanted to, and I ended up basically settling on the Tikka T1X. Now, the lighting in here is not spectacular, so I realize a black rifle against a dark gray shirt, it's a little bit hard to see this guy, but I picked the T1X for a couple of reasons. Those that I just listed, that it is a rimfire version of an already existing centerfire rifle that is popular in centerfire competition. So it kind of stays in that line of what I see NRL 22 as a great value. It gives you the ability to train for centerfire matches, or it gives you the ability to try out centerfire format at a lower cost of entry. So with the T1X, what you get is the same footprint as the T3. So if you wanted to jump right from this right into open class, not even worry about base class, then there are a ton of chassis available that this rifle will fit in, a ton of different stocks out there. If you shoot something like a regular McMillan, I'm fairly certain McMillan is inletting all their popular stocks for the T3, so you should be able to do that. The bottom metal on it mimics the T3 bottom metal. So it does use smaller magazines. It uses these little guys here. Now, I wasn't greatly impressed with the magazines. We'll see how durable these are. They are just plastic magazines, but the benefit is they are 10-round magazines right out of the box. They have this really nice bottom on them. So when they're inserted in the gun, they stick out the bottom here. So getting your magazine out really is no problem at all. Now you can't really do a single release and drop, but NRL 22, you don't do a lot of mag changes anyway. So this works out fine for that. Now, a few drawbacks to this setup. One is the low comb. So you notice now I've just got a Tasco Golden Antler scope on here. It came off of a 22, I think, way back in the day, but it was the only scope that I had that actually had dovetail rings that I could drop right onto this guy. I may do it to get a rough zero and a rough accuracy idea, but it's only a 9-power scope and a regular duplex reticle. So not something that I'm going to really use other than for a couple of training days until I get the scope base in to be able to go to Picatinny rings. So the next slight drawback with this rifle is the pistol grip. And I'll try to hold it down here on the white portion of my shirt so you guys can see. The pistol grip has a pretty extreme curve. If you're used to hunting stocks, then this is no big deal, but that wrist break is fine for shooting offhand, but it is not ideal for prone or precision type setups. But thankfully, Tikka does make a more vertical grip, and it's just a screw and a plastic feature up here that holds this grip in. So I can take the screw out and swap this guy out. And I have already ordered the target grip, or the more vertical grip for it. And they also make a beaver tail attachment that should slide on the forend and secure with a screw down here. That will give me a wider forend. So when I'm not running a bipod, when I'm running a Game Changer bag, the forend should ride the bag a little bit better. So we'll see how that works out, and that will be part of the overall review / base buildup video. Now up here at the front, you'll see we've got just a standard Harris bipod with a pod lock on it. It only comes with a single sling stud. That is problematic. I've got to look at the rules, because what I will probably end up doing is coming here on the side, and I will probably end up putting flush cups in the side of the stock assuming that that is fine in the rules. Again, I have to read specifically for that because I am modifying the stock by putting those in, but I believe it's permissible. So I'll put flush cups in to be able to actually run a TAB PRS sling for competition. I'm considering putting a rail on the front here just so I can run a wider variety of bipods, but really with this stock, the sling stud setup is sufficient because most guys that are running base class are probably going to run a Harris or a Harris clone like the Caldwell bipods. They're fairly inexpensive. They will work well for a lighter weight rifle in the base class setup. So that basically will get us set up and get us out and ready to go. I am going to contact Victor Company and see about the Titan Universal cheek rest. We should be able to run the Titan cheek rests on this thing so I can build the comb up to where I need it to be. And again, that's totally permissible in base class. You can add cheek risers to your stock to get it dialed in to wherever you want. The next thing that I really have to work on this guy is the scope base. I've ordered Diversified Innovative Products, a DIP scope base. They make one that is specific for the T1X and mounts over the dovetail and gives me a Picatinny rail. Area 419 also makes one, and I may go ahead and try to get an Area 419 in as well so I can compare the two of them and see which one is better. But the Diversified Products, they also had a bolt handle for the T3 or the T1X because the T1X and the T3X use a different bolt handle attachment. The T1X, the bolt handle screws in. It's not a dovetail like the T3X. The bolt handle, I don't believe, is allowable in base class. But again, I have to check the rules specifically for that. If it is not, it's not a big deal because we've got this bolt handle that sticks out here at 90 degrees when it is unlocked. So when we go from lockdown to unlocked, it's really not that big a deal. It sticks out here really well clear of the scope eyepiece, and then it's easy to drive forward with your thumb. Go ahead and pull the mag out here, make sure we're clear. So I'm going to dry fire it. So now we have the pressure of recocking to lift the bolt. It's really not that difficult to do with a bladed hand and then run the bolt. So a larger bolt knob probably isn't necessary, but this is pretty dinky compared to most of the centerfire rifles I have. So it may be interesting to see for practice if I run into really any differences between the two. I would like to run it in competition, but if it is not allowable under base class rules, then it's really not that big of a deal. The T1X does have a 20-inch barrel. It is definitely not what I would call a heavy barrel, which there are pros and cons to that. The fact that it is a thinner barrel means that when I take my 11-year-old son out to shoot this thing, it will be easier for him to manipulate the rifle and move it between the different points on the barricades, different things on the tank trap, that kind of stuff. And of course, from the offhand stage, it will be easier for him to shoot this thing slung supported. The drawback to that is it definitely does not have the weight of a centerfire rifle. Now, interestingly enough, there are chassis out there, again, that are centerfire rifle chassis that will fit the T1X. So there is one specific one out there that I'm thinking of that we'll hopefully be able to look at in a month or two that will be able to add weight to the rifle. So if you want to build it up for a open class and you want to add weight for a better comparison to your centerfire rifle, then that will work. Now, one of the last things that is really cool about this is the muzzle does come threaded from the factory. So it is ready to accept a suppressor, and I have my Gemtech Outback 2 suppressor here. So that will go on here, and we will see what our accuracy is like and how enjoyable that is shooting with the suppressor on it. You guys have any questions over the T1X that we can talk about that I can answer? I'm sitting here just talking to myself for a little while, so I really want to answer your questions. Now, all you guys are typing. One thing that I will throw in here is that the magazines right now don't seem to be very plentiful. They're out of stock in a lot of places. They are about $35 a piece. So we'll see. We'll see how that goes um, as we go along. Hopefully, magazines will become more available. One is sufficient to run most NRL 22 matches. But ideally, I would like to have a couple of backups because they are plastic. I don't know how durable they are. If I drop a loaded mag on the ground, I bust a feed lip, I really, really want to have a backup so I'm not in a bad place. So Kevin asks, you mentioned that it only had a 9x optic. What magnification range do you typically use for NRL 22? Kevin, that is an excellent question. For NRL 22, the scope that is on the Voodoo right now is a 3-18. It is a Vortex Razor Gen 2. And 3-18, I think, is a really, really good magnification range. Now, I will admit I rarely ever use 3 power on the bottom end. Usually, I don't go below 10 power because what we run into in NRL 22 matches is the close range targets where you would think you would be able to dial the power way back are usually very small targets. The typical target array, the little swing set that comes in the target pack, the smallest swinger on that is a 1/4 inch. So making sure that you're lined up on a 1/4 inch target, you want to have some decent magnification. So again, I don't generally go below 10. Now the issue that you run into is you can't really run a fixed 10 because most fixed 10s will not dial the parallax into 25 yards, which that is our closest firing line. Usually targets are 25, 50, 75, and 100. So if you're stuck with a close parallax of 50, you are really going to be hurting on that 1/4 inch 25-yard target. But for paper stages, like say a 75 or 100-yard paper stage, I really like to be able to see exactly where that bullet went to. I want to be able to do an offset because here lately, for whatever reason, I've almost always had to hold an offset for the paper stage. So for that, I want at least 15 power. 20 to 25 power is probably a little bit better on any of the paper stages where you're just laying behind the gun, where you don't have to actually move around or transition the gun to different things. So I think a 5 to 25 would probably be a great option, although 4 to 14 is probably good to go as well. Now, I'll talk about a scope that I have right here, which is a candidate to go onto this rifle. And while I'm talking about this, I would really love to hear options from you guys, scopes that you would like to see on the base model rifle. Keep in mind that the MSRP on this rifle, I'll pull it up right here, is $499. So the MSRP, we'll call it $500. That leaves me $550 for scope, not rings and base, just scope alone. So toss me up some recommendations for scopes in that $500 price range that you guys would really like to see. The Cabela's Covenant models have come up a couple of times. The Vortex Diamondback Tactical first focal plane is obviously a solid choice. And there are quite a few Athlon scopes that are in that choice or that price range. So throw some options up in the comments that you want to hear us discuss, and we'll take a look at that scope. Now onto the Athlon in front of me here. If I remember right, this is the Helios model. They haven't actually marked on here, but it is an 8-34 by 56. It is a mill reticle, and it is mill turrets on it. It is a first focal plane reticle, and the minimum parallax adjustment on this guy is 15 yards. So it will dial down to 15 yards. I did shoot this on the 1022 for a couple of NRL 22 matches, and it seems to work just fine. The reticle is accurate enough to hold, and with scopes like this, I end up doing a lot of holding and not a lot of dialing unless I really have to. But it got the job done. The turrets are not super distinct. The clicks are a little bit easier than I like. They're spaced kind of far apart. We get 5 mils per rev on this guy. So, that's kind of good to go. But overall, I was not super impressed with this. 8 power is fine. Using it in the 20 power range, again, is fine. Going up to 34 power, though, the glass really gets quite a bit milky and you lose a lot of field of view. So I wouldn't use this scope much above 25 power. So even though I've got the 34 power on tap, it's just really not necessary. And basically what that ends up being is a larger, heavier scope than I really need for, that option. But if we don't come to a great conclusion by the time the scope base arrives for the Tikka, I may go ahead and just drop this on for training, for fun, to just get some accuracy testing and some ammo testing done, because it is still a solid scope and it is in that really low price range. Some other scopes that I looked at, like I said, the Covenant from Cabela's looks really interesting. They've got the Covenant 5 and the Covenant 7, and that's just the power factor. So the 5, there's I believe a 3 to 15. Pull it up on my screen here real quick. In the Covenant 5, there is a 3 to 15 power model, and then there is a 5 to 25 power model. So the only drawback to those, these are both first focal plane, they're mil reticles, they have a graduated reticle. The drawback to them is that they do not, lost my train of thought here too. The drawback to them is the specifications don't actually have the minimum parallax adjustment. I am quite sure that I would be fine with the 3 to 15. The lower magnification scopes tend to have a closer parallax adjustment, but I don't know what the minimum parallax adjustment is on the 5 to 25. I'm going to have to call one of the Cabela stores or their customer service and see if I can get those specs. If one of you guys out there actually has one of the Cabela scopes, then I would really love to hear what you guys know about the minimum magnification on it. So Landon has a question on here. It says, what are your thoughts on the new vague rules on base versus open class in NRL 22? Well, I'll tell you, I've got quite a few opinions on it, but I haven't actually gotten to talk to the guys about their ideology behind the rule change. I neglected to do that last week, and this week was the Nationals, the NRL 22 Nationals in Vegas, so not a good time to call them and try to ask about stuff like that. But I'm going to get a hold of Tyler and find out exactly what the idea was behind the rule change, because the $1,050 price limit and the ability to shift that between the rifle and optic, I think is kind of neat because it gives you a little bit more room to play. Options are good. I like the ability for the competitor to try to make choices and see how those choices affect outcomes. Remember, this is a game. It's not really training for anything specific. It's just going out and having fun, ringing steel and punching holes in paper, and associating with the community. So the price limit, not a big deal. It has a pretty open-ended deal, so you don't have to go spend $1,050. Like I said, this Tikka, the MSRP on it is $499. I actually purchased it for $419. The minimum advertised pricing is supposed to be $468, but they were running a sale on them down at Whitaker Guns, where I went and picked this up yesterday. So you can build a rig for relatively inexpensive. You can buy a $500 rifle, throw a couple $100 scope on it just to get you in, get you started, and that's good to go. But the issue that I have with the rules, and again, something I have to talk to Tyler about, is the way that they specified what rifles are legal for base class. So outside the price point, the qualification is you have to be able to locate an MSRP for the rifle. So for instance, this T1X, If next year, um, if Tika goes to the T2X, or whatever they want to call the next model, and they discontinue the T1X, then the T1X is no longer legal for base class. It would automatically get bumped to open class even if nothing was changed on the rifle itself. That causes problems because there's a hesitancy to invest in the higher end base class rifles if you want to stay in base class. Um, a great example I will give is Ruger 1022. Now, there is a wide variety of 1022 rifles, from the 1022 carbine that has that tapered barrel. It has the M1 carbine style stock with the barrel band on it. Um, that has been around forever. So that model absolutely applies for base class and might be a good option because it's going to probably be around for a good while. But then when you get into their higher end, their different target models, those change from year to year. So if you went and got such and such company's exclusive laminated stock target model with engraving and whatever, even if it fell in the base class pricing, which many of them do, then if they discontinue that model next year, that SKU goes away and there's something else to replace it, well, that MSRP may be obliterated from the internet and you may not be able to find it anymore. And if you can't find the MSRP or it's a discontinued rifle, now it's not legal for base class anymore. Now, I want to make sure that I make the differentiation between the official rules and club rules. I can pretty much tell you, I don't want to really speak for our local match director, Neil. He does an excellent, excellent job. But I have a sneaking suspicion that if we have a guy that shows up at our club, wants to get into NRL 22, wants to shoot whatever it is that he brought, and it's not a $2,000, $3,000 22 rifle, and it's got a midline optic on it, that kind of stuff, and he tells us he bought it for $400, $500, we're probably going to let him shoot in base class. Now, when he goes and registers for NRL 22 and we start submitting scores, now you have to go adhere to the national rule book. That's just the way it is. But if you're just coming out and you're shooting alongside the other guys and we're not submitting your scores for the national totals, then what does it really matter? In my opinion, it doesn't, not unless you're knocking the top guys down. If you're knocking the top guys down, then we'll have to make an adjustment based on that. But that's my current feeling. Really, with a reading of the rule book now, I would still like to see rifles grandfathered in that if you got proof of what the MSRP was when you purchased the rifle, then that rifle is legal going forward, as long as you haven't changed anything outside of the permissible modifications. Now, getting off the prices and moving into the permissible modifications, those have expanded significantly from last season. Now, replacing triggers is permissible. Bedding the stock is permissible. So those really start to bring things up. I realize that bedding the stock is not an expensive proposition if you do it yourself, and can greatly help the accuracy of some of the rifles out there. Even if it's not actually traditional bedding, if you're taking something like a 1022 that came in a Hogue stock and you are increasing the rigidity in that stock by a lot of guys will like epoxy carbon fiber arrow shafts in the fore end and a bunch of other stuff. That can be beneficial for a very budget price. So I don't necessarily have a problem with that. Trigger modifications, that's kind of a slippery slope that we start to get into because like I ordered a Yo Dave trigger spring for this rifle. Kind of wanted to see how that works. The lowest trigger pull, I believe the T1X, you can adjust down to about 2.5 pounds. With this lighter weight a rifle, I really want a lighter trigger pull on it so it's less likely to disturb the rifle when it's on a barricade. So I could go and just swap out the trigger. I believe Timney makes a trigger that will fit in here and still be in the base class rules, but that is a significant price expenditure. And the whole idea, I think, of base class is to keep the rifles affordable. So spring kits, polishing, that kind of stuff, I don't necessarily have a problem with. I think we probably ought to have it limited, though, to factory triggers. I don't know what your opinion is on that. I'd love to hear what you guys think about the trigger tuning versus trigger swap. I'd like to see factory triggers retained and just tuned in the base class. Now, open class, again, sky's the limit. As long as it's a safe trigger, hey, rock on with it. But it's kind of interesting overall the way the rules have changed, and I really do want to sit down with Tyler on the phone and talk to him about what was driving the rule change, because really what matters to me is what the situation was that set this up, what the arguments from the shooters, because believe it or not, NRL 22 is really, really receptive to input from the shooters. I'm on their Facebook group, and it's a NRL 22 advisors group. It's a closed group, but I love seeing the input in there and how things develop. So I do want to sit down with them and find out what the deal was with that. Now, Michael asks, what process do you use to find what ammo will shoot best in the new rifle? Start with what's proven in other rifles, grab a bunch off the shelf, and see what groups best? Well, excellent question. Obviously, with 22s, there's no load workup. So what you have to do is select ammo that you think will perform well and go out and shoot test groups. I'm going to start with Norma 22 match because I have a case of it here. I bought like 5 or 10,000 the last time I purchased ammo. And the reason I did that is before that I was shooting Wolf Match Target, which is made the same place that SK is. It's not Wolf like steel-cased Wolf. It is extremely high-quality ammunition made in Germany. So the Wolf ammunition just kind of dried up for me. I was having trouble getting it. So I shot some Norma. My dad had some of that for his 22. Worked great in the 1022, worked great in the Voodoo, so I bought a bunch of it. Tons of ammo out there. Lapua Center X works well. Right now I've got a couple of boxes of a variety of different types, and I'm just going to go out to the range and I'm going to shoot groups with it at 50 yards, and I'm going to see what performs best in it. The trick is, though, making sure that the barrel is fouled out as you switch groups or as you switch lots of ammo or manufacturers of ammo, because the lubrication that is on, for instance, the Norma 22 may not be the exact same formulation as what is on the Wolf or what is on the Lapua or what is on the various different ones out there. So you want to make sure you get that cleaned out. You want to make sure you lay down fresh lead and get going. I don't like to clean the barrel between group tests. One, because it takes way too long. 22 barrels usually work better when they are lead fouled. So you could drag a bore snake through it to speed the process, but I will probably just shoot about 10 to 20 rounds through to normalize it of the ammo that I'm going to test next, and then shoot some groups. So it's going to be a long day at the range. I'll bring some steel out so I can get some training while I'm shooting those fouling groups before I sit down and actually shoot for record. But that's really the best way to do it. Now, the Bench Rest 22 guys, they have all their own methods. If you really want to get into the weeds with it, just look up Bench Rest 22 ammo selection. Those guys will go out and they will actually gauge the rim thickness on the cartridges. They will do a variety of other stuff. I could shoot these over a chronograph and look for SDs. If I was shooting long range with it, and I may get into that a little bit later this year, there's another local group that does long range 22. Then I may actually go out and I may clock different ammo for SDs, because then that's going to be critically important. But a slight SD alteration at 100 yards and in is not going to be a drastic difference on the target for me. So just getting ammo out and shooting the variety of different boxes out there, that's really about the best you can hope for. So If you guys have any other questions that you'd like to talk about, please post them up. Either post them up in the YouTube comments or post them up in the Patreon live stream. I am bouncing back and forth between both of them, watching comments on both sides. So that's why you see my eyeballs going back and forth. That's what's going on. Interestingly enough, we haven't heard the dogs yet. We've got washing machine going, so that's beeping over there on the other side of the wall. The dogs have actually been fairly quiet in the living room. The new dog, Dinah, we took her down to Whitaker's yesterday. I'm trying to get her more normalized around people. She had a little bit of a barking problem previously where anytime we were indoors somewhere with strangers, she would bark at the strangers. Thankfully, that wasn't a problem at Whitaker's. It was being Memorial Day weekend. There wasn't a lot of people in the store. But it's a larger store and just enough people that we could walk around and see how she reacts to people. Being a almost 11-month-old German Shepherd puppy, she gets a lot of attention from people, and some of it's good, some of it's a little hesitant, but she did pretty well. So that was a ton of fun. So while I'm waiting for you guys to post up some other questions, I will talk about a new item that we got in. Now this right here, and I will turn it hopefully so you guys get a little bit better light on it. This is commonly referred to as a Roland Special. What a Roland Special is a Glock 19 with a KKM compensator and barrel and a Surefire X300 tactical light on the bottom of it. Now, this one is a little bit special because we have the Aimpoint Acro on here. And try to hold it up, see if you guys can see it right there. Now, the Acro is something I've been excited about for a little while. It really looks kind of big and bulky on this guy. Some of you guys said that the form factor works well with the blockiness of the Glock. I guess that could be true. I've been looking at RMRs on these guns for too long, so anything other than an RMR pattern looks a little bit strange. But I'm anxious to get this guy out and test it out. It is probably going to be one of the more durable red dot sights out there, and I've been doing a lot of work with red dot sights here lately. Our local police department is looking at this as an option, still in the very, very early stages of looking at red dots as an option, not necessarily the Acro. And the Acro is definitely designed as a law enforcement and military option. So not a sporting option. It's designed to be hard use, and it's designed for duty. So really interesting. There are a couple of things that I dislike about it. The first being that it uses its own mounting pattern. It is not a RMR mounting pattern. It's not a Delta Point mounting pattern. There is actually a dovetail underneath here, and it's not even a Picatinny dovetail. It's just its own type dovetail with a cross slot in it, and then it has a screw on this side that clamps it onto the dovetail. It looks like a fairly strong mounting solution. This is the Aimpoint MOS plate that goes in here. There's some companies out there that are already cutting Glock slides specifically with the dovetail, so no mounting plate is required. The Aimpoint will just go right on to a dovetail milled in the slide, which that's kind of cool. I like that option because hopefully that will minimize any possibility of the optic moving, because there's actually a ledge that the front of the optic is pushing against in addition to the crossbolt. Now, drawbacks on this is that you have, it seems like a smaller sight window, smaller picture, sight picture than the Aimpoint, than the RMR, definitely smaller than the Delta Point Pro. Delta Point Pro has a very open sight picture. So we'll see how that affects speed on target, target acquisition, and more importantly, moving from various different targets. But anytime you're using a red dot sight, you should run both eyes open. So we'll see what we run into with that. Now you'll notice on this, I do have standard, these are Trijicon night sights on here, and that was because we did have the Shield RMS mounted on this guy, and the Shield allows you to run standard height sights and get a co-witness when you use their mounting plate. I haven't swapped sights here to suppressor height sights because I ran out. I've got 2 sets that are on the way in. But the Aimpoint, if you want to co-witness, will require suppressor height sights. The bottom of the frame, for lack of better words, or bottom of the tube, obscures the entirety of the rear sight notch. So when you are lined up on target, if you're trying to get a co-witness or trying to use the irons, you can't see the front sight at all. Now, with standard height sights, while you are looking through the center of the optic, so if the dot is in the center of the optic, you can see the front sight post. So if you're not necessarily worried about getting a co-witness with your iron sights, if you're one of these guys that is just using the front sight as an alignment aid to drive the dot to the target, which that is well out of the scope of this video. There's a huge argument for that or against it. Then you can still use standard height sights. So if you had regular plastic Glock sights on here and you were driving the gun out the target, you can track that white dot to the target until the red dot lines up. So that is usable, and then that gives you the largest, clearest window that you can possibly get. However, my preference is for suppressor height sights on defensive guns and with red dots, and I likely will put them on this guy as soon as it comes in. So that's kind of what we've going on here. The Acro is a little bit of a more expensive option, but you know, it seems to be pretty durable. One last thing, and I apologize, I didn't actually bring the holster out here. The Safariland RDS holsters, the SLS and ALS for the Glock, actually will allow you to run the Acro. The Acro fits in there. I didn't expect that at all. Now, the little plastic cover that you snap over top of it, that does not close. It still leaves the entirety of the ocular exposed. But in this optic, that's not really a deal breaker. In fact, you can just snap that cover off the holster completely, go stash it away somewhere, and the hood will still close. The ALS will still lock the gun in. No problems whatsoever there that I have noticed so far. Now, with the ocular exposed, you are going to have rain, snow, dirt, dust, etc. get down on there. But because it's flat, and the objective is flat, then clearing debris is not that big of a deal. And if you run into a situation where you're rolling in the mud, something like that, then you could very easily just smudge the mud off and then gas on. Now, that's not the best way to go about it for regular cleaning, because you're eventually going to scratch this. I was told by Aimpoint reps at the SHOT Show that the front cover here is sacrificial and it is replaceable, but the information I've not gotten yet is if it is end user replaceable. I don't believe it is. I believe it will have to go back to Aimpoint for service, and then they could swap it off. The rear also appears to be set in and probably also sacrificial glass as well. So cleaning, you should still clean these just like you do any other high quality lens, high quality optic. You shouldn't wipe it with your t-shirt and grind the dust into it. But the nice thing is you're not going to get a puddle of water to collect inside of it because it's flat. You're not going to get, hopefully you won't get dust bunnies and belly button lint and all kinds of other stuff in there if you decide to carry this in a concealed carry manner. So we'll see going forward. I actually have not even shot this yet. I just got it mounted up on the gun for a demo, and I need to get out to the range and crank some rounds through it. So hopefully we'll get that done tomorrow. So we are getting close to the end. We got about 12 minutes left. So I really would love to get some questions from you guys. Again, I'm watching both the YouTube comments and watching our Patreon comments. So please go ahead and toss your comments up in there and questions, and let me see what you have to say. So I'll ramble on right now just for a few minutes about the 2 optics for this project that I am really closely considering, and you guys can pop in and throw up comments on what you think about them. In my mind, the Cabela's Covenant 5 and Covenant 7 really are attractive to me. Now, the Covenant 5, the 5 to 25 model comes in at $349.99. So if we take $500 for the rifle, $349.99 for the scope, that's about $850. That still comes in well under the $1,050 budget, and I think is reachable for most people. What that would tell me is that with the entire package, we end up with a base class rifle under $1,000. So if you put a um, Caldwell or some other midline bipod on it, and you don't spend a ton of money on rings, then you get in there at a really great price. The trigger spring that I'm putting in is $10, and hopefully that will give us a crisp 1.5 pound pull somewhere in that area. But I think that is a really, really great option. Now, when we jump up into the Diamondback Tactical first focal plane, that's really going to get us up there a little bit closer to maxing out that base class budget. And really, though, it's an easy option. It's the default option. It's almost why I don't want to take that option, because it's a safety. You know that scope's going to perform. Again, I was looking through one this weekend. The turrets are more than acceptable for the price range, the feel, the clicks. They track somewhat accurately, again, for the price range. The EBR reticle in it is definitely a good option for holdovers and anything else that you're going to do in NRL 22 type shooting. That scope may even be a really good option for a budget centerfire rifle. But for the NRL base class, I think it is really going to be one of the top level scopes that you can get to. But that Covenant keeps sneaking in, and I really want to see what's going on with it. The Athlon scopes, I kind of know what to expect from them right now. They're just kind of acceptable. This one, I wasn't highly impressed with it, but a viewer sent it in to me because he just really had no use for it anymore. So I was definitely appreciative to get that. So we could go with Athlon scopes if that's something that you guys really wanted to see. But right now, I'm really kind of gravitating towards the Cabela's Covenant scopes. And what I want to hear from you guys that are in Australia or outside the US, or even my guys over there in Germany, you probably would have difficulty getting hold of these. I don't know if Cabela's would ship them out, so I don't know how much that information is going to be worthwhile to our German and Australian friends. So the Covenant is definitely a tight focus for me, since the NRL 22 really is more of a US focused thing, but the Vortex Diamondback Tactical is really interesting. So, and Michael asks, jumping back to scopes, do you find it advantageous to use holdovers, or do you find opportunities to dial more in NRL 22? Michael, the majority of the time, if we're shooting at different yard lines, I'm going to hold over. The scopes that we're using for this in the base class area and that are not the most reliable as far as return to zero and tracking when we stay in that really cheap price range. So I know the reticle is not going to move on me from holding from one to holding to another. So I tend to hold more. That, and for me, what I want to concentrate on is getting into position and getting the rifle stable. Then the other thing that you really add into it is, regardless of if you want to hold and dial, if you are jumping between a 25-yard target and a 100-yard target, there's no way that you're getting out of adjusting your parallax. You are going to have to move that parallax turret to be able to see your target in sharp focus. So with the parallax turret needing to be manipulated and needing to get the gun in different positions, I just totally forget about dialing because it's too many things that you're doing in that 2-minute time frame. Now, 2 minutes is a lot of time for 10 shots, but very often we see, and I did this on a couple of stages this last Saturday, I'm using all my time just moving and then trying to get a stable shot and firing when the reticle is stable, not when it's bouncing all around. So my preference really is to hold. And because my preference is to hold, then Christmas tree type reticles, or at least finely graduated vertical stadia lines in reticles, is really beneficial. I would not try to shoot NRL 22 with a standard mil dot reticle. I think standard mil dots have pretty much gone the way of the dodo now. But if standard mil dot is all you got, you can absolutely make it work. You just have to figure out exactly what you want to do there. You have to make sure that your standard mil dots are not so large that they're obscuring a close range target. I think most of them are going to be fine enough. I don't know any that are so large that they would black out that quarter-inch target at 25. The longer range targets are going to be large enough that the mil dot probably is not going to cause you a problem. So that is my opinion on holding versus dialing. So you guys have any other questions that we can cover in the next 5 minutes before we wrap up? I would absolutely love to hear them. So this being Memorial Day weekend, I just put in an order for quite a few different components for this rifle. Hopefully we will get them in at some point in time in the next week. And this Mail Call Mondays, I'm pretty much going to be running down the T1X and talking about it and why I chose it over the other options. So definitely drop some comments in underneath the live stream comments when we end this that you would like to see. In fact, on Patreon, I will just start a new post asking for input, questions that you want to see answered specifically on the T1X. That way I can answer them on Mail Call Mondays. So hopefully we will be able to get this guy out over this next week. And my goal with this whole project is to review the Tikka T1X on its own, see what kind of rifle it is on its own, and then probably separately we will talk about the NRL 22 base class build and how this rifle applies towards that. So a lot of it's going to be rehashing what we did right here, but this is really just for you guys. These videos are just for you guys to answer questions, and that of course will be for our audience as a whole. And here, while we're wrapping up, I really want to say thank you very much, guys, for your support. This really helps me out a ton. Basically, our Patreon proceeds, for lack of a better analogy, help pay for this whole rifle. The money that you guys donate to us every month really helps. It goes a long way. We keep seeing our revenue drop off farther and farther on YouTube. I don't expect that to turn around anytime soon. So your support really, really helps us out. So again, I just want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for your viewership, and I really want to thank you for your presence on Patreon. If you guys have any ideas about how you would like to see us improve your Patreon experience, then please go ahead and leave it in the comments down below this video, or just shoot me a message anytime you care. So we are at the 58-minute mark right here. My voice is getting ready to go out. So I think we are going to shut it down at this point. I'm just refreshing the comments on Patreon to see if we have anything left here. And it doesn't look like we do. So again, thank you guys very much for watching. If you are watching this after the live stream on YouTube, because it will be available on YouTube for Patreon subscribers, and then later on we'll open it up for the general audience. Please make sure you click that like button down below. Give us a little bit of a thumbs up. You more than likely are a subscriber if you're watching this, but if you're watching it after the fact and you're not a subscriber, we would love to have you. So please hit that little subscribe button. And if you're not a Patreon subscriber and you want to learn more, click the link down to Patreon down below, where you can see these live when we send them out. And that's going to be it for this. Until next time, get out and shoot.